The stream is live.
The stream is live. All right. I'm going to make sure the stream is live on YouTube and not just live for us. So if anyone's listening, please hold on just one more. Ah, there we go. It is.
Okay.
And oh, look at that. Okay, perfect. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Wise Ask. This is been a long time coming. I am with a Wise Asker from back in the day, Tom Cheetham. Tom, welcome to the show. This isn't really a show. This is really just two friends getting together, and we haven't caught up in a good long time. And then everyone else is invited to join the conversation, but they're on mute, so we can't hear them, and that's great because we like to hear ourselves.
Hey, so, that's what I like about online.
That's as inclusive as I like to get with these things.
Yeah, you don't have the guys in the back of the room making comments that you can hear.
So how have you been? What's new with you that
what's new
I
with
don't know
me?
about?
Wow. I got older. My daughter's getting married in the fall, so that's very exciting. I've been to Brazil since we last talked, I think. And
are you talking about that, or is that hush hush?
Yeah, no, I would talk about that because because it's kind of a big deal. And I'm still doing my online teaching. And I also was in Spain. John Vervaeke invited me to go to Spain to talk about Corban, and at some point within the year, within a few months, there should be some sort of online thing about that. So that was fun, and okay, so that sort of sets a stage.
That sets the stage.
I've been doing the teaching thing, and here's an important thing, and Jeremy, you remember, I just, because of the online teaching thing, I'm really used to just talking. So when you want to say something, just do it. I will try to pretend that this is a potential conversation, because it should be, because I always learn things. But the most important thing of recent vintage in my life is that I started teaching from my own books for the first time. And that's been super weird and interesting. So we just did the first two, and next week we're going to start the third. And I'd never done that before. And I'm not quite sure why. And I'm not quite sure why I did, though I have some ideas. Anyway, that's been really kind of cool. So
what made you decide to do that?
That's a good question. So upon some reflection, I think it might be that I finally felt that I had some authority. Yeah. In the following sense, and this is provisional understanding. After I'm dead, perhaps I will understand better. But the provisional understanding was that during the more than 2 decades when I was writing those books, they were anticipatory. I was projecting things that I was projecting a world I wanted to move into. And it took a long time to catch up with myself, if you see what I mean. And I actually sort of think that one of the prime reasons I did, though not the only one, was the Iboga experiences in Brazil, although we could argue about that. Anyway, not all that long ago, I was thinking of a book, something I could teach, and I thought I could try my own. And it's really interesting because they were written a long time ago by a person who I am no longer, by definition.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning from them and also recognizing things and thinking, oh, I didn't understand that when I said it, but now I do. So it's that sort of thing. It's really super interesting.
Do you find that you are telling your classes that? Like,
Yeah.
here's
Oh,
something
yeah.
that I didn't know, or do you just speak with authority like I always knew?
No, 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 no. They know. They know because um, the kind of authority because by authority it's 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 really okay. Always when I teach, and it isn't teaching, it's just I mean, this makes it sound so bad. I am capable of doing um, conversations with students. I haven't
Uh-huh.
done it really. I haven't done it for a really long time, but that's very fun. But I haven't done it online. I think I may be undefended enough to start doing that. But for the last 7 years, doing 6 or 7, doing the online teaching, it's just been me talking to myself in public and
Hmm.
thinking through things. And there's a small group of people who don't mind listening to me do that, and maybe a smaller group of people who really get something out of it because it's me exploring this material that I've been exploring through the writing and now through the extemporaneous thinking for 3 decades. And the feeling of authority that I have now is sort of the opposite of what we usually mean by authority. Um, so I'm totally free to explore things to see how they might work out because I don't know anything.
Mm.
You know?
Has
Yeah.
anything changed with you in terms of like one of the things I've done, as you know, because you wrote a little blurb for it, was write a book about Kundalini and release that. And as I put at the end of the book, just speaking about it, not authoritative, well, maybe, I don't know, but just speaking about it full chested, let's say, about some of the things that I've kind of hedged on in the past, had the effect of actually, um, I don't want to say that that act cleared up my back issues that I've had for the past 25 years, but that somebody decided to clear up my back. Some invisible person decided it was time. Have you had anything like that? Like maybe not that drastic and in that way, but do you find that like when you change up the way that you speak about things in a way that is fully authentic, um, does some other thing in your life change or no?
Yeah.
Like you've passed a test in some way, and here's your reward.
Um yeah, I'll second that. Although I wouldn't and this is super interesting to me because our experiences in my extremely um, um, uncertain understanding of them is they're I'm just making this up. We're just two guys talking. They're kind of mirror images. That's not right. But you had these things happen to you in a way that has never been the case for me. I came to wherever it is I yeah, no, see, the comparison of the two of us doesn't quite work. Let me say this about what you're suggesting. It's pretty clear to me now that I didn't write those books.
Hmm.
That I was totally compelled to write them. I'm not saying I was channeling them. It's not the case that they came when my eyes were closed. I worked pretty hard on them.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I wrote them because I didn't have a choice. This was just what I had to do. And that's how they came out. But I never felt that I could be, for instance, proud of my books. People would say really nice things about them, which they still do. And I've always been able to say, thank you. I'm so glad that they were good for you. They were good for me too. But I didn't write them. I
Yeah.
can't take any credit for it. I really can't. Actually, I had this a similar subject come up when I was talking to Bernardo Kastrup on a podcast last year or sometime, and he started out in physics, and he's written physics stuff, and but he said even about the physics stuff, he felt the same way, and then he went into crazy philosophy and idealism and all this stuff. He said I felt the same way. He said I didn't do that. That wasn't me. I can't take credit for it. So, to get to the nub of your question, I can't take credit for the books. And I agreed to go to Brazil and become initiated with these plant medicines. Not, I mean, certainly it was volition, but it was like, yes, I should do that. I'll do that now. And those experiences have just made me feel even more strongly that this isn't my life. Not in the sense that most people mean that it's easier for me, rightly or wrongly, to look back on the last 40 years as if, holy crow, somebody's been in charge here, and it sure wasn't me. But
Mm.
nothing as striking as your kinds of experiences. Mine have all been really little, you
Does
know.
that happen? Because you hear that all the time with artists and writers and musicians, that it's not coming from me thing. And I feel it when I'm writing. You feel when you're in the zone, and it's not.
Yeah,
It's like impersonal consciousness, not personal consciousness somehow, or some mixture of the two. I mean, you can tell the difference even as you're writing what I'm having to think hard about, and what is just
yeah.
flowing, and where is this coming from. Um, but does that happen in other aspects of our lives? I wonder, like, or is it strictly just artistic endeavors? Like, are there
No,
other
well,
things?
no. I think it does. Gosh, let's see. How much of this is it okay if I share? I think I think it's
You can share all of
let
it. You have my
let me
permission to.
let me phrase. I mean, it's because it involves another person. So
Uh,
so let me who I should check with, uh, and that's really the whole point. Um, let's let's say that I have been discovering in the last year or so in and it's not insignificant that I went to Brazil 4 times and was initiated 4 times. That made a difference. But then what's been happening to me in my, yeah, this is a good way to do it, in my interpersonal relations. And I was talking about this just yesterday, also feels as if, oh, this is so nice. And I am so much easier to get along with. And I can't take any credit for it because I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I we I was told, well, you know, it's because you now have agency. And I said, no, no, it's not that I had agency. It's that I stopped having agency. The agency I had was trying to be in control. And what I had to learn to make things right was not to do that anymore. I mean, it sounds very Zen, very Buddhist, and I think it is, honestly. But it also feels, in the context of the plant medicines, it's like, yeah, somebody else is I don't know, in charge, but kind of blowing the wind, because it's not
Yeah.
me.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, so I think in urgency, I wrote something along the lines of there's a speed faster than light, and it's the speed of relationship. And that was
Mm,
like in 2010. And I talked
mm,
about that a little bit. And then just today, was it today or last night? I'm so freaking tired. I can't remember. But I think it was today, this morning. Um, I saw just a headline. I tried to click on the article, but then you've got to like sign up or get cookies or whatever. I'm like, no. But the headline was like, some physicists say that the universe is not comprised of objects or something like that. It's comprised of relationships. And I thought that's interesting. It's like they're catching up, but really
yeah,
catching up with like native cultures who have known all of this all along.
yeah,
Everything is relational. Um, but when you think about that and you think about the self, the psychological construct of the self, which is this thought construct babbling at you right now, it for some reason we can like in spiritual circles you talk about that it's an illusion. The self is an illusion,
mm, mm.
but it's there are layers to the illusion, right? And one of those layers seems to be that it is solitary. Like we are an
Yeah,
amalgamation of
yeah.
influences, and it's not
Mm.
just genetic. It's not just our parents in childhood. There also seems to be. I mean, even you could wake up from a dream that was really great or really awful, and that can predict how you're going to feel during the day, and you just can't get out of that funk, or you just won't get out of that euphoria for some reason. That has nothing really to do with you personally. It's just how you woke up like even influences like that. And then when you add on the creative and the feeling as though there's an actual being or beings who are guiding or puppeteering or something, that's a other sort of level of it, or at least feeling of it. It could be a mistranslation for sure. But it just seems like we are this amalgamation of like waves of patterns blowing over each other. And for some reason, because the words are coming out of my mouth, it feels like there is a me being this and saying this. And it's really might not be, or it might be. And then there's all this other stuff that is also me that goes unaccounted for.
Yeah, I do know, and and what occurs to me in the moment is, yeah, is why do we think we exist as an ego? I mean, Hillman famously says, "What the hell is that? I've never seen one. There isn't an ego," and and yeah, you really know. And I'm often struck, particularly in situations like this, when I'm speaking extemporaneously. You sort of look over your shoulder and you say, "Where are these words coming from? How does that? What is that? Is there somebody back there reading a script? I don't think so." And
Well,
if he was,
and if there is that somebody, a bunch of
yeah, it
somebodies
just
too,
goes
reading
back
into
through.
them,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
just, yeah, I
forever and
have
ever.
no, I mean, I mean, yeah. So I'm perfectly happy. The real puzzle, I mean, really, the real puzzle is how do we get through the day without going totally psychotic and dissociative all the time and just forgetting your name, where you came from, what you're doing. I mean, in certain drugged or toxic states, you lose your sense of identity. And I had that back in 1970 in November, after smoking hashish for almost 3 months straight without a break. And I did the depersonalization dissociation thing. And that was very, very, very strange and very bad. Um,
Hmm.
and, and, what do I conclude from that? One thing one might conclude from that, but I don't think it's right, is that I spent the next gazillion years trying to relax around that sense of not being at all. I actually think that that sense of not being at all was only cranked up by the hashish, and that it had happened much earlier in my life. a sudden recognition that I'm not here. I mean, weird things happen to very small children, as you well know.
But then who's there recognizing that you're not there?
Beats the hell out of me, man. I have no idea.
Well, that's you,
Yep.
right? Like, it's because it's weird. It maybe that is sort of inversing the thing where it's like right now you feel like you, and we're talking hypothetically about these other influences and aspects and stuff. But when you take away or you put into the background, recede into the background, you this other comes to the foreground, and so you think like you've lost yourself, but really have you, or are you just another tree in the woods at that, at that
Yeah,
point?
I mean, I think the only thing that gives me continuity is my body. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, it's the incarnate, it's the habitual. I've got pain down here. I've got these bad thoughts over here. There's all this stuff which is both or neither material and psychological. It's one of the things I learned from Iboga, and I kind of thought it was true theoretically, is that plant somehow works on levels that where the distinctions among spirit, mind, and matter are just totally irrelevant. And the take home from that is that the sense of having a psyche and a self looking out of these two eyes is very strongly culturally determined.
Hmm.
It's a really malleable phenomenon. And I first heard about that, as my students have heard interminably. I first heard about that idea from a history professor in 1972, who was early in the academic field, and this is more common now, in recognizing, along with the anthropologists, that whoa, your sense of self, or the sense of self, is like malleable. And if you grow up in the outback of Australia and never see anything technological, your sense of what constitutes the dreaming is going to be almost totally inaccessible to the white guys who come and destroy your
Mm-hmm.
land. And so that was very unsettling for me as an 18-year-old. You know, is the idea, as he put it, that the modern Western sense of self is neither very common nor normative. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that's weird. And I think really the subsequent 50 years of my life have been trying to explore one way or another, usually just intellectually, what the malleability, the changeability of the self feels like, and
Mm-hmm.
what it means about reality.
Well, let's put a pin right there because go back to the question of does something in that switch up between approaching it intellectually and now going and doing iboga or whatever, does that change you in other ways? Like, does it loosen you up, and so you're experiencing more of what may or may not be a larger ecology around us, or psychic phenomena, or more synchronicities, or something, like once you start engaging in a larger way that's not just a rational sort of book context, does does it unfold in your life as well that way? Does it
Yeah,
open you up to something as well,
I, I don't
or is
I
it
don't
all
think it.
contained to South America for you?
Oh, no, 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 and that's what I was saying before when we were talking about relationship. You know, no, I can imagine that it could. You could go to South America, take a bunch of drugs, have a really nice time, and come home, be the same person. But that wasn't going to happen to me, because I spent several decades prepping for this without having any idea that that's the way I now think of it. Intellectually prepping to make it conceivable, to make the transition intellectually acceptable, which for someone like me is not unimportant, you know. But to answer your question, yeah, it does, it can, and I think should change the rest of your life, because otherwise it hasn't been fulfilled, it hasn't been completed. I mean, I let me riff on that for just a minute, because my sense has long been that this mutability of consciousness, is how I've said it in some of the books, um, is sort of it's a variable, it's a continuum, you know, and you could, if you were free enough to notice it, recognize it in every single minute of your day. You know, when I reach to pick up this mug, I'm taking the world literally. And when I look at you, I'm behaving as if you're there and you're not. And so I'm not going to reach out and try to, pet your head or something.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, you're welcome. And that's kind of weird, you know. I'm not sure that other sentient organisms could easily do that. I mean, I'm making the distinction, okay, so there's that. And then there's also the experience of writing a grocery list versus writing a poem, or I don't know, sketching something or painting or music, when suddenly, oh, everything kind of turns fluid. I think there's a wide range, even within a single human being in a single culture. I think there's a wide range of modes of modes of relationality, modes of relationship that we're so used to, we don't think of them as being different. Okay, then you crank that dial all the way up when you're taking iboga, and it's or I mean caffeine, for instance. It could be any number of things. You're messing with that relationality dial. I mean, that's kind of bogus, but you see my point.
Yeah. Yep. So do you want to get into your Iboga stuff from your last trip?
I don't mind doing it, and it's not unhelpful to me to kind of, and it's also increasingly difficult to remember. Uh, but so yeah, we could do that. I can,
Okay,
and
yeah,
I
because I haven't
can.
heard this, so
Oh no, come on, haven't you at all?
no,
Oh,
no,
which
your
one?
last
The
trip.
the
I don't
the last
whatever the
one,
last
yeah,
one was. Because I think
the
the one
last
before
one,
that was the one where you were like, I don't want to talk about it too much.
yeah.
I'll say a few
So
things.
let's, yeah. So here's the. I've well, I don't know if, I guess I flipped in Kripal's sense, but it was a slow roll. Okay.
That would be Jeff
Um,
Kripal, the
yeah.
religious studies professor from Rice.
Yeah. And he
For
wrote a
those who
book
don't know.
called, for those who don't know, and he wrote a book called The Flip. And it was
Yeah,
about, well, this is very pertinent, which is why I mention
yeah.
it, being a very intelligent guy. It's a neat book. And what it's about is people like me who started out as rationalists and scientists who suddenly, oh shit, realized, oh dear, that's uh that's partial, and the world rushed in, because one of the things that the rational mindset, and there's lots of versions of the rational mindset, because people are super complicated and the world is super complicated. But the rational mindset, the reason you do that is to control stuff. It's like my metaphor of the dial. I mean, we're discussing something which is really weird and very hard to articulate at all. And so I go to physics. Well, it's on a continuum, this relationality consciousness thing, and you turn the dial up. And people might think, oh, I kind of see what he's talking about. But then when you have the experiences and you're conscious of them, that metaphor is like, yeah, not very good at all. Um, so one of the things that the rational mind does is ignore stuff. Just I'm
Hmm.
not paying attention. I'm not paying attention. It's like the story I like to tell. Jesus, I can go on forever, but you can stop me. Story I like to tell is one that I made up about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was famously an alchemist. This is not historical truth. This is me. Isaac Newton was in fact, this is truth, an alchemist for most of his life, I think. And my story is alchemy being hard and weird and emotionally and psychologically draining. One day he said, "Fuck this. I'm going to do something simple." And so he invented physics and the calculus, and you got F equals MA, you got a handful of variables, you describe reality, and you're done. And he says, "Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going back to the real work." And we took the physics stuff and all its falderall as the only truth. That's why I say I have slowly flipped. So for since 1970, when Ed Krantz first told me that consciousness was this weird thing and your experience of reality is different in different cultures, at least that. Since then, I slowly worked my way up to thinking, boy, that's true. And I did Hillman and Jung and Corbin, and I had some very important personal change, transformational experiences based on that work. And then I went to Brazil. They kind of finished the deal for me. Okay, let's see if I can do this, the short version, because I went 4 times. First
Well,
of
wait,
all,
we don't need the first three because we've heard those
we've
on this
heard
show
those.
before. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, so we've heard those. Let me just recall it in my own mind. Those were a series. First, I got to do this quickly. The first one was just me being an asshole and the plant telling me, no, we don't talk to people like you. And then I realized I had to come back. No, I mean, really, we don't talk to you. And she gave me just a little bit of here. And yeah, here's something. Whoa, I got to come back, even though it was awful. Second time, worse, way worse, dark, miserable, unconscious, just awful. Finished, never coming back. 10 minutes after, I got to come back. Third time, even worse. Absolute just horror show for 36 hours of awful blah, blah, blah. As soon as it's over, I got to come back. Fourth time. This was the first time I actually had something like the experiences that people were talking about around me. My conclusion from that is that I was really hard nut to crack. There wasn't anybody going to give me anything until I'd been pulverized out of all those resistances and denials and ugliness and all that stuff had to be worked out of me with a very large hammer and God knows what. And the result was a very short, dark experience. So rather than being on the mat for 36 hours, which was experience 2 and 3, the effect of the plant was maybe 5 6 hours, and it was dark, and I have lots of images that are associated with it. And I saw some beings. No one was going to talk to me. I still wasn't. I wasn't ready to have anybody talk to me. Okay, but they showed me some very peculiar beings, all very dark stuff. But then I woke up and I remembered the experience of having these relationships, and that had never happened before. So I came to in the morning and I recognized that, oh my God, I I remember those things. I remember what happened to me, and oh, I remember these things, these beings that I saw, and then I had a whole day, um, which I'd never had before, to be out and eat and talk to people and discuss my experience a little bit. And then there's the second night. And honestly, I'd have to look in my notebook. I honestly don't remember whether I took any more of the plant medicine. Um, because you can, but you don't have to the second night. I think maybe I did a little bit, and I just had the most lovely experience with the ceremony that goes on before they leave you alone for the night, with the music, and I was just in joy with my little rattles. It's a very real ceremony with music and stuff. I'm lying down because I'm an old guy. There were people dancing, but no, not me. And I was just happy, and that
Mhm.
doesn't happen, you know, and um, so the one of the things that was confirmed for me, and for for everybody, but for people who know about the Bwiti tradition in Gabon, and that's the tradition into which I am initiated. Um, you Many people, most usually at some point, meet their serpent of rebirth, is what it's called in
Mm.
Gabonese, your Mumbayano. And you know who it is. Well, I had never had that because I wasn't conscious at all. But I was asked by the Nima, well, did you meet your Mumbayano? I said, well, I don't think so. No. And did anybody give you a name? No, no one gave me a name. And he said, because he remembered the time before, he said, well, do you think that being, which I did meet the time, but do you think that was your Mumbayano, even though she didn't give me her name? And that's when I realized, yeah, that was definitely, this is confirmation of that. How do I know this? I did. Style. I knew by the style of the experience, which was dark and deep and weird. Anyway, so I came out of it feeling as if something had shifted. I was more receptive and able to be shown some things. And yet, I wanted to come back again, which I will do, I hope, at some point. I don't know when. But it's not one, and it's not over when you come home. It's still working on you because you've been shown things, and it does stuff to you psychophysically, which you could easily, maybe not easily, but you could come back and try to ignore and just plug yourself back into the old ways of doing things. I didn't, which is really nice. And so some of the things that I have wanted and expected to be able to change about myself are indeed slowly changing. And I don't feel like I did it. I can't say.
Mm.
I'm now a better person because I tried. No, you know, does that help?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this because I don't think I've ever asked you this. Maybe I have. I don't think I have. So on with the shrooms, everything is like, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's all hyper sort of manic, um, showing you cartoon stuff, and then immersing you in it. Is it like that with Iboga, or like what is your actual time mostly spent perceiving?
No, I mean, I did shrooms a couple of times before I went to Brazil, and that was my first psychedelic stuff. And I did not do it in a ritual ceremonial setting. I did it in a recreational setting. I grew them myself, and then I ate lots of them. And all I got was, I mean, people report some pretty profound things, but I didn't get that. I just got a little sick and lots of Grateful Dead posters, just weird,
Right.
weird stuff. And I thought, oh, nah, yeah, because I grew up in the '60s, but I never did the psychedelics back then. So I wasn't really moved to do any more than I did the Iboga. So my personal comparison doesn't count for much.
Well, but even that, even seeing, I mean, you've got a visual of Grateful Dead posters, or
Yeah,
fractals and whatever that is.
yeah,
Is that the same or similar to
no,
any of the time spent on Iboga?
no. And I would two cautionary comments before I say about make general statements about Iboga is, first of all, don't trust me, because even though you can read Daniel Pinchbeck and other people about the Iboga experience, I honestly think it's real. It can be kind of person specific, you know.
Hmm.
So I don't think there is an Iboga experience, though there are, I gather, similarities. And so that's one. And the other is, I kind of think I'm a bit of an outlier, because I did it 4 times before I had anything resembling what I was hearing the other people say. I mean, other people had, it's a dark drug. It takes you to dark places, and it can be very difficult for lots of people. Although I will say, everyone that I know of, um, in spite of the darkness, has come out of it thinking, "Oh my God, that was so worth it, so wonderful." So it's a positive experience for most people. Um, the first one doesn't count because I was all resistances. All right, so that was unusual. But it was essentially, nope, we don't talk to you. um, because, as somebody told me, you have to be willing to listen. You have to, and I got to say now, and this sounds weird to the old me, you've got to you've got to engage with these, whatever they, I don't know, beings. You got to engage with them, and if you are unable, as I was, to accept their reality, there's no point in bothering on there. It's like, wait, no, come back
Well,
later
see, that's
when you're
because the
ready.
thing that when I did the massive amount of shrooms that one time, there was the feeling of a Carney Barker entity that was essentially me talking to myself literally out loud. But it's a sense of like a mushroom entity speaking through you in the moment of like, oh, come on, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. Let's go do this. Let's see this. Let's watch this. And Terrence McKenna talked about that too, and talked about the feeling of, yeah, they seem like a salesman. Like they seem really nice up front, but there's an air of menace behind it that you don't
Mm,
want to push. And I felt that
mm.
too. But you don't feel that with this. So
Well,
I just want to get a
I
sense of
mean,
like not all hallucinogenics bring you to the same
I don't. Yeah, I
circumstances,
think
right?
I think that is true. I think that I have a really good friend who's done them all, and and he says, in his opinion, Iboga's kind of off on its own. Not that, but it's an unusual thing. So, but I can't confirm or deny that. The other thing that's about the two middle experiences is that they were just, well, I was on the mat for 36 hours, not always unconscious, but uncomfortable and sometimes awake, but largely just down. Um, and the second time was mostly um, somatic work, dark, like being dragged through hot tar, but not even really being aware, just every once in a while coming up and thinking, God, this is, and then going back in. That was it. I didn't meet anybody. I just got work done. The second time was like that, but then at the very end, I saw this horrible thing. It was, and I got cosmic visions and it was very, very, very bad. But I won't go into it in detail.
Why?
But it
Why
was.
won't you go into that? That's
Well, I'll
what.
go into it. I'll go into it.
Who doesn't want to hear that?
So, who doesn't want to hear that? Okay, great. So
And is this what you mean by you say it brings you to a dark place?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the dark place that I had to see clearly. Okay, here's see, this is it's hard. Well, it's really hard to talk about this kind of material because it doesn't lend itself to human language very well. Uh, so at the end of this third time, at the end of the I don't know, along many, many, many hours on the mat, I was led to a cosmic place. I was out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of, well, that comes a little bit later, but I was, I encountered a female being of cosmically huge proportions who was the cause of all destruction. And I was being shown the meaninglessness of all being. I was shown, actually wrote it down, and I have it on my wall because I drew pictures of this. Wave after wave of extreme cosmic apocalypse, sequential and superimposed, that is to say, throughout all time and all together at the same time. Utter void, all being is meaningless, and the accompanying feelings, which were unpleasant, as you might imagine. And that lasted for some length of time. And I was asked by the Nema when I described that, did she give you her name? And I said, no, she was not in a speaking mood. um, it was really dark. And then when that was over, I I found myself floating in cosmic space, and there were two scientists there who said, well, they'd run some experiments, and insofar as I remember, I could look it up in my notebooks. One of the experiments had failed utterly, and they were bummed about that. But the other one, it worked okay, and they said, "Oh, well, at least now we've proven the existence of black holes," and and that was my lady, right? Um, and and there was a while during that experience where I sort of came to, and I thought, oh no, Iboga's not going to work for me. It's going to leave me here in this void of utter meaninglessness, and that was unpleasant. And then it didn't, and I was shown that this cosmic female being, no, it didn't look anything like a woman, but it was female. It looked it looked kind of like an enormous black refrigerator. Sorry.
Okay.
Like really, really tall, like light years tall, that kind of thing, with
Hmm.
some lights coming out of it. But I was shown that she was on one side, and then next to her was nothing. But something belonged there. We people who study mythology, we can think about this later and recognize that this was the female, and the void was the place where there was nothing. Well, if read your Joseph Campbell, it's probably male, but I didn't have that in the experience. I just had that
Mm.
there was more, kind of more to come. And then to segue to the fourth experience, some of the details of the imagery there just reinforced that dark cosmic feeling of real weirdness that continued in such a way that I felt quite confident in saying that the fourth experience was confirming its continuity with the third experience, so
Mm.
that when I was asked whether that being that I had met the third time was my serpent of rebirth, my Mumbayano, my angel, if you will, in Corban's account, I said, yeah, I think so. And so there she is. And one of the Nemas said, well, it sounds like Kali to me. And Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not Hindu, but yeah, the mother of all apocalypses. That's that kind of negative female figure, and this sense of profound weirdness that suffused the fourth time when I was conscious for them. Um, that fits together somehow for me. But it's a I mean, it's a real interesting. Here comes it really is interesting. I don't know what to make of these
Well,
alien
do you
beings that I made.
do you
Yeah.
think that so when you're shown or told or however that comes about that being is completely meaningless, you feel something about that in the moment, right? And then you think about it later. Does the feeling that you had in the moment with it, do you think that that is correct in what you're, or are you supposed to work through that somehow?
No, no. The the feeling is actually just the the result of having that experience is just the opposite of thinking, oh, now I've seen the truth, which is that everything is meaning. It's not that. It is that, oh my God, this is mythic. There's actually a lot of background in my experience to that, which I briefly do. Um, the experience of that negative creature made it quite clear that this is a what we call mythological truth. But that makes it parts of that means it's part of the other huge cosmic truths. So one of the things that was most striking about this experience and a couple of the others is that they're totally beyond the human. It was like any little depression or sense of the abyss that my little meat brain has, just beside the point. There's no way. And this is one of the things that I got that was really important for me about reading Urgency, your book, because I really because that came before any of my Brazil experiences. I think, yeah, no, it didn't. It was during after the first, maybe into the second, but I responded really strongly from on the basis of things that I had come to think and believe intellectually, but maybe also on the basis, yes, definitely on the basis of some experiences which I could talk about involving my work with Henri Corbin and Ibn Arabi. That you were right on the nose with that. That anybody who thinks that anything we could make up, we could invent, we could create with our little bitty meat brain is so tiny that that it's like, and if you think that you could know the truth, and in my particular history, that life is really meaningless. So only I felt really strongly way too early in life for the idea that if you're a strong enough person, you can handle the idea, which is the truth, that his life is meaningless. And only the strong can truly grasp that. And I didn't know it, but that underlay much of my life. And it was Corbin and Ibn Arabi who got me to the point where I realized, long before Iboga, long before reading you, that, oh my God, what a knucklehead. You read something in a book somewhere that somebody thought up, and you got the darkest idea you possibly could, and you thought it was true, in some cosmic sense, what kind of inflation is that? That's absurd. That's just absurd. Just give it up, you
Hmm.
know? And so this experience of the which struck me as utterly beyond human capacity, comprehension, the whole 9 yards. It's like, oh, right, there's that. It's not my fault. It's not my idea. It's one part of this vast, extra human, beyond human. There's no words for it, but it's only one part of it.
Hmm. Okay. I was going to ask you another question, but I think it's probably irrelevant. But maybe I'll ask it anyway. Just in terms of like when Jeff Ritzman, back in the Paratopia days, had his experiences change from being abducted by, whatever gray aliens or whatever they are, to sit down chats with a tall shrouded being, and the shrouded being says, "Here, take dictation. You can tell this to your audience," and then sort of explains life, the universe, and everything.
Mm,
Jeff said right up front he thinks that this is not to be taken literally necessarily. Let's treat it like a thought experiment, or let's treat it like something that is true enough that we can unravel it ourselves, because he thinks that's the point, more so than this is really the way things work. And uh, now, cut to uh, when the reason I wrote "I am to tell you this and I am to tell you it is fiction" and called it that is because a version of life, the universe, and everything came to me all at once, and the part dealing with multiverse theory was different than what I was writing, and so I stopped what I was writing and went with this.
mm,
But I don't know that it's not fiction,
mm.
and so I'm to tell you this and I'm to tell you it is fiction. It looks good, but it could be world building. It could be, you know, another form of like trying to foist religion upon us in some way.
Mm.
Um, and then the type of experience you're talking about, where you're shown and feel and are something in the moment with it, but that is not literally necessarily the case. It's actually trying to bring you out of something. It has to do with you personally, at least, and maybe all of us, but definitely you in the moment with it. What do you make of that? I mean, do you think that there is a reality that is being hidden, or a reality that is being explained, or is it always thought experiments and shit? Is there always an element of, some would say, deceit and a lie, but really
Mm.
teachable moments through stories that feel like they should be literally true, and you feel like you're getting something that's true, but then it turns out not that's not the case. And yet these are the higher beings who should know and who we look to as higher beings to tell it. You know what I mean? Like,
I
or
think I
or
do.
the trip, you look to the trip to be the big spiritual and it gets you to work on your stuff, but sometimes it gets you to work on your stuff through fictionalized accounts and feelings of how things work. And even the
Yeah,
being itself may be a fictionalized account of the
yeah,
intelligence that is actually engaging with you. What do you make of all that?
yeah. I mean, uh, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, preface this by I don't know. I mean, what are you supposed to? I, I guess the big take home for me, coming from science and philosophy and intellect, was just stop. I mean, come on, man. I I think that, but there's so much to say. But I mean, the primary take home for me is you've got to start from what Henri Corbin calls mystical poverty, and the recognition that we're just little tiny beings in a universe that is so vast, and and that's not a bad thing.
Well, wait, let's pause there for a sec
Yeah,
because here's the other part of it. Henry Corbin and people like him, if there are people like him, people who
yeah,
talk about their experiences and even say things like that we're really small and let's start there. But then he goes on to have theories. He goes on to talk
yeah.
about the angel out in front and to make declarative statements about certain things. So what do you do with that? Why? How can he?
You do what Ralph Waldo Emerson says, which is to hold your symbols very lightly. So I think there's an enormous truth in the way you put it. What would you say about teachable moments and fictional accounts? I wanted this is a hard one to learn, and I'm not sure I can claim to have totally. No, I know can't claim to have totally learned it. That's the whole point here. But Hillman, James Hillman, who I read assiduously for many years, and he kind of helped save my life because he was the first person that I took seriously who said, "Look, something like the imagination is what makes reality." And I'll kind of stick with that. But then you got to ask what imagination is, which we're not doing right now. But he said, look, you're always in the imagination. It's all imagination. Even literalizing is a form of imagining. And when I first read that, I thought I couldn't do it. Now I can. you know, I had a poet friend. We were co-teaching a course 30 years ago. It was called Science and Poetry, or something. It was Literature and Science. And she was a poet through and through. Every bone in her body was poetry. And she could not understand science. And I couldn't explain it to her until eventually I said, oh, they ignore everything that is most important to you. Oh, she said, okay, now I get it. and so what she couldn't do was take literal things literally, at least not for very long. I mean, in order to pick up your water glass, you have to take it pretty literally. And as Hillman would say, well, yeah, we're fallen beings and we're down here and we would all die. If we were all poets and painters, there would be no government and it would be chaos. Somebody has to take things literally in order to be able to do some stuff. But if you're in an indigenous community, once you finish getting your food, you sing, you dance, you commune with the spirits. Because all that literal stuff that you do to just keep your body alive, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. But the real work is this other stuff.
Hmm.
So everybody's got to take things literally. And we come from this long tradition of Western science where we're still, I certainly have been, looking for the truth. So when Risman, or when is she real? Do you believe that she was a real being? And I was asked that not about her, but about another feminine being who showed up briefly to me when I was discussing this stuff. And it came as a shock to me. My answer, one of those students said, but Tom, wait, do you think she was real? And that's the first time I was asked that about one of these experiences. And I eventually said, it doesn't matter. the those categories of rationality, they're beside the point. There she was, and she had this effect on me. And to ask, well, real, like, yeah, but it's not the point.
Well, see,
And
this
here
gets
comes
to
and here
yeah. Go
come
ahead.
wait here comes your fictional teachable moment. You get this. You see, we have to say this fiction. You get this story that Richmond was given, and what do you then do with it? And how it? Wouldn't here's a thought. Okay, you you hear Jeff's story, and it just fucking blows you away, and it changes the way you live your life. in certain ways, and we're self-reflective creatures, and you start to realize that it's turning you into, I don't know, a heroin addict or the lover of your mother in a way beyond anything you could, you gotta kind of, yeah, maybe not, no, I gotta tweak that story. It's not, it's the world isn't out there. It's a responsive universe. It matters how you respond to the stories that are given to you. And that's what I mean by the world being just infinitely malleable. And somewhere up there are these creatures who are watching us do this, and they do know more than we do. And they're thinking, yeah, this guy. Yeah, he looks, there's promise there. And these others, they're just going down the toilet. Is something like that true? I like that story. Is this making any sense? I mean, I think it kind of makes sense because it's what you're suggesting about the storytelling, the interactivity. And my take home is that anything that increases the intimacy and the relationship, the nature of the relationality of your movement through the world is good. And anything that cuts you off from other people and other beings is bad.
Hmm. Well, one interesting question about like the Ritzman thing, especially because that was, I mean, the thing that came to me was coming to me in the context of I'm writing a book about this stuff, so thank you. But Ritzman wasn't writing a book about anything, and so when you get that, when you get like, okay, here's what it is: the universe is fractals. We're a particle in your world, and
That is
Horton
so
hears a
cool.
who, and blah blah blah. You wouldn't come to somebody in the 1500s and tell them that.
No,
So
probably not.
so there so there's something you would come and tell them something that's useful to them, or you wouldn't come to them at all. So let's assume they would something would come to you in the 1500s and tell you something that would be important. Then why is this important for us now? Like, why would it be important to tell you about the sciency stuff? I mean, I could see it as like a gateway to more interaction where now I've got you on the hook with your interest, and now I'm going to give you the stuff you need to hear. That's the way like science fiction and horror and all sorts of, all stories sort of work that way.
Yeah.
But that part never came. It was always just, here's this part of it. Bye. you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is just two guys talking. Um, I think implicit in what you're saying is that it's a good idea to be able to understand what happened to him and that story from a larger framework where it can make sense to us, and that such a framework is accessible to us. And I'm not sure how strongly I mean this, but I'm pretty allergic to that move outward because that's what science and rationality always do. What's the big context in which this event makes sense to me? And I gotta say, I'm not sure that's the right. I think I'm experimenting with a story that points me away from asking those bigger questions. And I have a personal proclivity for tiny things that goes back to my youth. And so maybe it's just that part of me, but I know for I know for a fact that there's a certain way of asking that question of, my gosh, what did that mean? What does it mean about the beings that gave him that knowledge? That question tends to take you away from more important things.
Well, maybe, but go with me on this.
Okay.
Because this is the way I'm looking at it, I guess, is
Yeah.
like in a normal world, having a higher being or something come to you and tell you how the universe works and what they're up to and why they're here and all of that, that would be the deep story. But if we're to assume that this is part of a heritage of like all throughout humanity, beings have come and said things,
Yeah.
they couldn't say this thing again prior to the
Yeah.
scientific
Okay.
revolution, prior to physics. So they would have said something else.
Yeah.
So it's not the deep story. It's the surface shallow story leading to the deep. And maybe we never got to it because Jeff freaked out at one point and called off
Okay.
the relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
But then what's the point of reaching out to an audience through a specific person if that person can
Yeah.
call off the relationship? Then what is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I haven't thought about that. This is fascinating and it's really helpful. It's really interesting and fascinating because I haven't thought about it that way. Um, so let me, yeah, let me set up the dichotomy here between the way I typically think of these things and what you're suggesting, which is, I think, a strong counter argument to the way I normally think about these things. So I think it's super important. I think about Corbin's and Jung's Gnostic experiences as I understand Corbin to have thought about them, which is to say, you can have experiences brought to you by the divine angel that, oh gosh, how does, there's a scholar of, an American scholar of Ibn Arabi named William Chittick, who, and I hope I can quote this, he says, Ibn Arabi shows a way in which you can be, it can be revealed to you a truth which is personally binding and absolute, but culturally relative. So
hmm,
that when you're standing on a mountain and God tells you the truth, your conclusion is not to tell everyone what God has told you and make them follow those rules. Okay. That's very Corbinian. Corbin, at least in my understanding of Corbin. So you get these truths that are transformative, that turn you, in the best of circumstances, to a loving, humble, open being. And in the utopia that then arises the possibility of an entire society of people, all of whom have had the truth revealed to them. They could all tell lovely stories, and their conclusion is just to love each other more. Okay. So this sense of individual certainty does not turn into a power trip. It turns into humility and relationality between you and the insects and you and the rocks and you and every human being. Okay, so that's the way I like to think about those downloads of the divine or the strange beings, right? Then you got this other possibility, you know, and what worries me. So I won't say. Let's just think it's me, and you're shown something as you're told that it's the truth. Ooh, see, I mean, immediately I get all weird. I don't like that because that goes off wrong real fast. That's, I mean, think of Elon Musk. He knows that human beings should all go extinct and we should download our brains into, and they're, you see, this is why I liked Corbin so much and Illich and Jung and Hillman, because they're all super allergic to people who claim absolute knowledge. And that's, it's a puzzle because if you get nailed with something, and it's too bad, but people do, that you're told is the truth, you become potentially kind of dangerous
hmm.
in the long run. So I prefer this other story, but as you say, maybe it's not right.
Well, I don't know. So do you think that with your what you experienced or have been experiencing on Iboga, the things that you have seen, how you have felt about it, how you have interpreted it, do you think that it is possible for another person to have the exact same experiences as you and walk away thinking that they have mastered something, thinking that they are prophets, thinking that they are enlightened, thinking that they are in communion with something that is definitely telling them truth, thinking in a different way than you're thinking about it in those heightened ways? Or is it baked in that
Oh, it's
that it's
beautiful.
personal and it's supposed to be you unraveling?
Oh, that's a great. That is a super good question. That is really, really good. Uh, we need to call Kreipel in, Mr. Comparative Experience. I mean, because honestly, he's the kind of person who's thought about this in this huge context of all sorts of extreme experiences in religion and elsewhere. Do I think that it's, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not, and then what do I say about that? I would take such a person aside and say, well, I beseech thee in the bowels of Christ, think it possible that thou mayest be mistaken, which is a quote, from uh, it's somebody in English history, British history. Um, you know, any. I mean, I just have so much of an allergy to certitude. Everything. I mean, in science, ideally proposes hypotheses, but then we take them literally and we think it's true. You know, And so, the answer to your question, yeah, I guess so. That's a bummer. Yeah,
Hmm.
happens a lot. People come back and they think, "Whoa, I got it!" And man, and how do you unconvince someone who's so sure? Because you know how powerful these experiences can
Well, but
be.
the thing that I don't get is that, so like this Iboga journey won't unfold for you if you're in a certain state of mind, if you're blocking it out. Like you said, the first
Mm,
time it was like, I'm
yeah,
not dealing with you. But this
yeah.
type of person, do you think they could go back and be dealt with? Like if they're so wrong about it, um, what's
Boy,
do
I
they ever
mean,
get corrected?
I mean, that's a question for someone with far more, with the experience of this. I'll tell you, this is a, this always happens with religions. You know, I don't know how you prevent it. I don't, and I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know whether and how indigenous peoples handled these things. In my romanticized view of indigenous peoples, this kind of problem doesn't arise very often. It's only in hierarchical societies, where one person can be the mouthpiece for the divine. Yeah, that's a problem. But I forget where I was going with that. I think to answer the question of whether a person could be cured of this grandiosity by Iboga, my only experience is, yeah, me worked for me or is working for me. But I was susceptible to being worked on because of Hillman, Corbin, Jung, Ibn Arabi, all those years, me, unbeknownst to myself, trying to get out of that inflationary mode where it is where your fundamental assumption is that it is possible for a human being to have the truth and it's probably really bad. you know and, and and man, that took me 50 years. And then Iboga, this is weird. This is the weird part. So my experiences in Iboga are all really dark, and yet they were transformative. And do I kind of hope that if I do it again, I see daisies and
Uh,
pretty women and happiness. I don't know. I probably wouldn't believe it. Nah,
well,
no, it's
did
not like that.
did the he's not a shaman. I don't know what to call him. The guy in charge.
Yeah,
Does he talk to the group about ego
yeah.
inflation before he, so it's sort of
Actually, no,
no.
no, he didn't. In my experience, no. You know what he? I've heard his talk, and it's different every time, but it shared one of the things that I noticed, because it's most important for me, that I believe he said each time, was that your relationship with your Mumbayano is yours and yours alone. It's individual in Jungian terms, it's individual and individuating. And the first time I heard him say that, that very first time when I was all resistances, I thought, oh my God, this is Corban's angel. It's exactly. And I thought, okay, I'm in. Okay, I can do this in spite of the, the bells and the feathers and all this weird shit, like, oh God, well, all right. And then he also said, and this was the second thing that got me going on it. He said, if anyone tells you they know what's going on, they're lying. And I thought, okay, I'm in. He's not selling me a religion, and my relationship to my angel is my own. And that's all I need. I'll try this. But then I was still full of all sorts of bullshit.
Hmm.
You know?
Sort of on this topic, but slight swerve. So a couple of days ago, I got an email from a professor who teaches religious studies, but focusing on Japanese Buddhism,
Hmm.
and he said that they Japanese Buddhists sort of frown upon the paranormal, and I keep getting this from right. Like it
Hmm.
seems like that seems to be a theme in religion or in spiritual stuff, even with like Ken Wilber in the Integral. You can integrate all this spiritual stuff, but don't talk about UFOs, right?
Hmm.
Let's not talk about
Hmm.
ghosts.
Hmm.
What do you think that is? Like it's got to be a part of their experience. At least talking to some intelligence or being talked to by some intelligence, even by way of like the Iboga experience type of thing. It's got to be in there. So, what do you think that there isn't just a moment where you like meditate and are quiet and nothing happens, and that nothing for some reason is enlightening, and that enlightenment has meaning that you can. No, there's got to be something that happened, and that something transcends and includes you. That means there's an intelligence that transcends and includes you, and we can all say that sort of, but as soon as you get specific with like paranormal or UFO or whatever, like modern day stuff,
Yeah.
there's this real resistance to it.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What is that amongst? Because I know you're not a Japanese Buddhist, but you
Oh,
see
but
that
no,
in
but it's all
scholarship too,
over.
right?
It's all over everywhere. Yeah, I mean, Greipel is good. He's great about that. He's made a career out of pointing that out. Um, it's it's okay. So
Could you
whatever
teach
you're,
the alien out in front? But you can
oh,
teach the
oh,
angel out in
oh,
front. Like
I
that's weird.
totally could. I totally could. Yes, I totally could do. I would be. I mean, there's a personal story here which is relevant, but let me frame it in your broader terms. I think what happens, and I'll give you my own example. I think what happens is, even if you're deeply religious, you fall into your tradition. And we'll just stick with something like Japanese Buddhists. People in tradition. Now, your tradition could be physics and science. Your tradition could be, I don't know, well, poets, they'll believe in anything. But, your tradition could be this, that, the other. And you get in your tradition, and there are things that are not talked about or ignored. and they become unimportant. And if you stay in that tradition long enough, you start to think to yourself, well, this works pretty well. I really like this. This is really good for me. And then things from the outside, you just block them off. You don't, you just, no, we don't. We're Japanese Buddhists. We don't think about fucking UFOs. We just don't bother. We don't need that. Just go away with your UFOs. It's just not, I mean, and there's a certain point to that, I suppose, because if you do attain enlightenment, then you don't give a shit whether they're UFOs or not. So, I mean, people are finite and they have blinders. So here's my personal example, because I went to the conference on Henri Corbin, whenever it was, just a few years ago, and Jeff Kripal was there, and I'd never met Jeff. I knew about his crazy books. And there he was, really nice guy. And he talked about, he gave a lecture in the footnotes, because I asked him for the lecture afterwards. That's when he talked about you in that lecture. But when I was listening to Jeffrey talk, and he was talking about the imaginal and UFOs, I didn't hear a word he said, because he's crazy Jeff Kripal from Rice, and he's talking about UFOs, and it just didn't. I couldn't do it. I have, but then afterwards I got thinking about it. I don't remember why. And I said, Jeff, you just send me the text, and that's when I recognized, because he points it out in footnotes with citations, that, oh my God. So I discovered Henri Corbin because of James Hillman. And Hillman, in a 1980 something or other essay, says, oh, if you want to know about imagination, this is your guy. And on the very next page, Hillman says, with regard to something, he says, oh, well, the paranormal, that's literalizing the imaginal. And therefore, it's just silly. We have to think about the paranormal. Well, Jeff points out that on the very page that Hillman quotes from Henri Corbin, right in the next paragraph, Corbin starts talking about psychic phenomena and the paranormal. And at that moment, because I'd spent 30 years reading Corbin and never giving any thought to that weird shit that he studies, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, I did it too. Hillman had this thing about the paranormal, and I just ignored it in Corbin's work. And Jeff cites like 6 places right in this book on Ibn Arabi where paranormal events occur. And I didn't pay any attention to him. And of course, for Corbin and Ibn Arabi, the paranormal, maybe UFOs. I mean, Ezekiel, he's got his chariot. That's cool, and Muhammad rides a chariot he rides a horse. He goes up and there's lights and all this shit. And for Ibn Arabi, I mean, God can do whatever the hell he wants. And if he wants UFOs down here and people see them, that's fine. It's not a problem. And it was actually that moment of reading Corbin through Kripal that led me then to your work and realizing, oh no, I have to think about crazy shit now too. Because I thought that I had the world of the imaginal and I understood it. And then Jeff says, yeah, but if you're going to do that, you got Vaeni and you got Strieber and it's like, no, it's not clean like you think it is. And so my whole little world of imagination just sort of crumbled, and then all those walls fell down. And then I went to Brazil.
Well,
so I think people they do it in defense.
But the difference too is that we're talking about Buddhists. We're talking about people who are looking for a paranormal experience.
But they're not thinking of it. But they're not.
I know they're not thinking of it that way. But that's what it is. Like, come on.
But that makes all the difference. There
and I'm not just saying like there's the one thing of like meditating and then maybe you see the clear light of being and it affects you and all of that. That's one type of thing. But the other thing is the psychic stuff, the Kundalini awakening stuff, the thing that's beyond that, where the slit opens in the back and the whatever, and at one point this demony looking gargoyle thing for me came in, and that is comparative to what Buddha talked about, what Jesus talked about, what various culture. I'm sure Joseph Campbell can find that confrontation with the demon just about everywhere. But to say that this and thankfully I was ignorant of all that, and so it just was
Yeah.
fascinating instead of scary. Instead
Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
challenge, it was just kind of like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is
Whoa.
cool.
Yeah.
Ignorance really is bliss. This is great. But there it is. I mean, the reason Joseph Campbell can find it everywhere is because it is everywhere. And so why are we pretending that it's not? Like the very
Well, wait
people
a minute.
who
I mean,
are seeking
here-
these experiences are also negating parts of these experiences.
here's a suggestion about it, because I don't know your sources and all that, but here's a suggestion. Your academic who says that Japanese Zen Buddhists don't recognize the paranormal, maybe they don't recognize UFOs, but
Maybe.
maybe they do recognize these other things as potential experiences, and they don't think of them as paranormal. They could well be dividing paranormal. I mean, it's hard. I mean, what does Jeff call it? Just the impossible. There's such a range of impossible things that appear across so many cultures. Maybe the Japanese Zen, include in their realm of possible things that overlap with what we call the paranormal, and then there's things that they just think are just, yeah, we don't know, we don't think that's crazy shit, but
Well, yeah.
they're perfectly okay with demons shooting out of their whatevers. I
Well,
don't
and I
know.
asked him to clarify, because it is, but he hasn't come back yet. But like, it is possible that maybe they think it's a distraction,
There's
in terms
that.
of, yeah, you
Yeah,
don't want to
there's
get
that.
distracted off the path. And I get
Yeah.
that. But just this idea, I mean, yeah. And I guess it'll be funny if it just comes down to UFOs in some way. Like it did, like I just keep going back to that time that someone had asked Ken Wilber about UFOs and he just sort of poo pooed it. And it
Mm.
just seems like in all of your intelligence and all of your mapping out the inner cosmos, it never dawns on you that there could be a nuance to it, that it's not aliens, that it's something, it is a modern representation of the other things that you do account for or you do allow. It just seems bizarre to me, this resistance, simply because the culture at large thinks aliens, and it may not be aliens, but that doesn't mean that you just go, that stuff's all crap. Anyway, let's talk about
Well,
let's talk
but
about
I
this
did.
light of clarity that you're going to experience when you.
But I did it. I did it. Because, and what did that feel like from the inside? Hillman says it's paranormal, blah blah blah. It's literalizing the imaginal. So, I mean, when I was 12 and 13, I loved this shit. you know, anything that I could find, science fiction, fantasy, the paranormal, morning of the magicians. I mean, I was just, yeah, oh man, this is great. And then you go to college, and they say, wait, we don't think about those things. Here's how you think, and and that here's how we think about things. I had to break out of so many containers, even to accept Hillman and Corbin. You know, and Hillman sort of, well, paranormal, we don't need to think about that. And what you're left with, in my experience, was so wonderful anyway that I didn't, and it was like, oh, this exploratory is wonderful. So I didn't even notice that the paranormal is all through Corbin and Ibn Arabi, because they just assume that, of course, these things could happen because they don't have the blinders on. And the experience for me was, these are just things that I don't pay attention to, because I mean, why? Because, well, you're finite. I mean, Jesus, it's just enough to worry about Henri Corbin and the imaginal. And if I have to take, and that was my feeling after my little flip with Jeffrey and his, and accepting that, oh my God, it's like, oh no, no, I have so much work to do. No, I thought I'd solved the problems of the universe, and I got UFOs and, I don't know, comic book characters, and, oh Jesus Christ! And then I read you, and it's like, oh man, oh, I don't. Do I have to think about that stuff? It's just too much. I mean, the take home there, I think, is that for some people, it's just too much.
Hmm.
Don't add that. It's just too much, man. How am I going to understand my complicated world if I? Oh, not that.
Right. Well,
You
but
know?
again, I think it's different for you than someone, because, for instance, someone who's teaching and telling people about states and stages of
Mm,
consciousness and climbing that hierarchy and all of that. It is possible that there are such things as psychic attacks and things like this, and that the more
mm,
open you are, the greater ecology is allowed in. And so if you're not told anything about navigating that, you're just told that that's all bullshit. That seems
mm.
problematic to me.
That seems really problematic to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Good night, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, the only association that I have to that is Gary Snyder. I read this years ago, but he's talking about the two different paths in Buddhism, and one you just ignore all those images, and you just ignore them so you can reach whatever. And the other one, and that's the Tibetan, I guess. It's something versus Vajrayana. And in the other one, no, you got to engage with the demons and the guy, all these other things. So there's lots of different styles here.
Hmm.
But if you're given a boy, if you're given a vision of psychocosmic reality which doesn't acknowledge the potential dangers, then that's not good, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and I wonder too, like with those two paths, if you don't choose the one where you engage with demons and all that, do you still encounter them? Are they still a factor?
Yeah, I think don't I should shut up because I'm not an expert on this stuff, but that's my memory of what he was
Hmm.
saying. Was yeah, I just ignore him as not being important. But
Interesting.
religions are complicated, and I'm sure there's lots of variety in that. And which is itself part of this story that we were telling and you were talking about before. I mean, all these incredibly different kinds of religions. I mean, you could just take Christianity, which isn't really one thing. It's like lots of different things. And why is that? Because people have different stories that they then try to conform to,
Hmm.
and as I mean, one of the things that Corbin was really good at teaching me, and Emerson puts it nicely, and Emerson is sort of the American Corbin. All your symbols, you have to hold them very lightly. Once you see a truth, let it open you up rather than got it.
Right.
you know? Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the good place to leave it.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're just shy of just over, I should say, 90 minutes
Okay.
and going strong. Um,
This
but
is
let's do
fun.
this again.
I like talking at you, but I also I but
I
you
like
don't
being
let
talked
me.
at. So,
Well, you're pretty good at not letting me. You say things that then are really interesting to me because you're the experiencer. I'm just some guy who, and so I mean, I have lots of questions for you, Jeremy. So we could do it at another time.
give me one. I'll do one and then we'll go.
Well, this is a big one. So I gather that our current president has recently said something about releasing all the files about UFOs. Is that a thing?
Uh-huh.
That's true.
Oh yeah.
And people, and I'm not, I don't, people seem really excited about that. And my guess is that you're not. And I would like a comment.
Yes. So President Obama goes on a podcast and says, "Yeah, of course aliens are real. I mean, I haven't seen them, but and there aren't in Area 51 unless there's some cabal that's keeping the truth from the president. As far as I know, we don't have them." And all he meant was, and it was obvious at the time to me that all he meant was, of course aliens are real. It's a big universe. They've got to
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
But people had to take that and be like, "Oh, he's not saying that." Now, Trump took that and went, how do I divert from the Epstein files? I know. I'll claim that in that podcast, Obama was giving away top secrets. So I guess it's okay for all of us to talk about top secrets. So I'll release the files because everyone's interested in these aliens. And so what he will do is they'll release some files that he wants you to pay attention to, and then because he's such a narcissist, he'll get pissed off that you're paying attention to them and not him, and then he'll be like, aliens are a Democrat hoax, why is anyone talking about this, it's stupid.
Yeah, perfect.
And then it'll be back to normal. That's what will happen.
Yeah.
But of course, people in
got it.
ufology are by and large morons, and a lot of them are right-wing morons, and so they're like, what, isn't this what we all wanted? We all wanted disclosure. Like, you're going to trust disclosure from this administration of all people, but any administration. I mean,
Right.
and NASA released some sort of statement that was basically like, oh, cool, he's releasing UFO files, that's great. We've seen a lot of anomalies with like our budget. We've never seen anomalies with aliens. So
Yeah. Okay. All right.
yeah,
And
I
I
think that
suppose
it's going to be a big, as they say, nothing
yeah,
burger.
that's what I figured. I've been kind of down in my little nest here, and I just was picking this stuff up. And I looked to see if it's not in like the mainstream press very much. Anyway, there's one question. I have deep metaphysical questions for you, but not now because we're both too tired for that.
Yeah, it's the metaphysical situation of being pooped. So
Yes, yes. I dressed for Hawaii, but it's actually snow out there, and I had to plow the driveway this morning.
ooh,
And because I'm getting old, I got the tractor stuck not once, but twice, and had to
wow.
shovel it out with my wife. I've never had to do that before, and so it was a good reason to move to Hawaii. So
Well, Tom, there's plenty of space here.
yeah,
Come
yeah,
on
don't
down.
you don't want me there. Though it'd be fun to visit sometime, so maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, for sure. Come visit.
Yeah.
And that goes for everyone out there listening. No, 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 I'm kidding.
No, it doesn't.
Um,
But I'll tell you what his address is if you all want to. Yeah.
all right. Well, thanks for chatting, and thanks everyone out there for listening to us chat.
It was fun.
Where can people find you if they want to
Oh,
speak with you
no,
further, read
thank
your
you.
stuff, sign
Yeah,
up?
no, you can find my website, which has my books and maybe some other stuff, and which is yeah, so that's useful. But you can find me on Substack, and I don't post a lot, but I do post about my upcoming courses. And there's one starting a week from yesterday on my third book, and they're not real expensive, and I'm also flexible. So it's just look me up on Substack. It's Tom Cheetham Substack, whatever. I'm easy to find. I guess the Substack itself is called As Variously as Possible. So you could at least subscribe and occasionally, come to a class where I do stuff like we were just doing, and so, which just made me a very bad ad. But we usually have fun, so that's where I am.
Sounds good. All right. I guess I have. Maybe I should just mention. I think it's next week, right? The first Thursday of March. That's next week, I think.
Mm,
I'm going to
yeah.
start releasing my own Substack, which I'm
Yes.
doing as a book or like a book.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, I'm going to start just releasing chapters in quotes weekly, and that will be free. And so look me up by name. It's going to be called, oh God, what is it? Barely Told Book of Life. I think that's what I'm calling it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
look
Sweet.
for that.
Oh, that's
If
exciting.
you've ever wanted to read me, but you've been like, I can't afford a book, well, here you go.
Yeah.
It'll be
No,
free.
that's a great idea, man. That is terrific. I'm really glad to hear that.
Okay. Yay. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye. This. I
So
like how
we're
you
off.
you hit end and then it says